Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we are digging into something incredibly fascinating. We're looking at the complete revitalization of Indonesian cooperatives, and specifically, the blueprint for their digital rebirth. We're going to unpack a really compelling collection of writings that look at how to transform these very historic, traditional entities into highly competitive, modern digital giants. So let's dive right in. Let's just tackle the elephant in the room right away. Are cooperatives actually outdated in the digital age? I mean, it's a perfectly fair question, right? If you're a young professional or, say, a gig economy worker looking at the current job market, you might honestly view the whole concept of a cooperative as a total relic of the past. You're probably wondering if an economic model codified way back in 1945 can seriously be the ultimate solution for today's hyper-competitive, tech-driven workforce. Well, the insights we're exploring today suggest that, yeah, it absolutely can be. To really wrap our heads around the potential here, we first have to understand the foundational philosophy. And what's truly fascinating in the source material is this core distinction it makes. A cooperative is fundamentally a human-based association. Think about how radically different that is from your standard traditional corporation, which operates as a capital-based association. In a corporation, your power and your voting rights are strictly determined by how much money you throw at it. But in a cooperative, it's all about equal democratic control. Literally, one person, one vote. The source emphasizes this sort of noble dream thesis, where cooperatives position capital merely as a tool, just an instrument. They prioritize human dignity, solidarity, and collective welfare above everything else. And this exact idea is actually hardwired right into Indonesia's constitutional DNA. Article 33 of the 1945 Constitution literally mandates that the economy is organized as a joint effort based on the family principle. Muhammad Hatta, who is known as the father of Indonesian cooperatives, interpreted this family principle not as some kind of nepotism, but as a profound, equal moral responsibility and true economic sovereignty for everyday people. It was basically designed as a legal and economic defense against exploitation, built right into the foundation of the nation. Now, this whole philosophy didn't just pop up overnight. It's got an incredible evolutionary timeline. Globally, it actually kicks off in 1844 with the Rochdale pioneers over in the UK, who set up the first modern principles to fight worker exploitation during the Industrial Revolution. Then, in Indonesia, it really began in 1896 when Raden Arya Wirya pioneered credit cooperatives in Purwokerto. His goal? To save local people from predatory loan sharks. By 1945, these anti-colonial, anti-exploitation roots were permanently locked into the Constitution, and by 1953, Muhammad Hatta was officially recognized for championing this model as the absolute pillar of Indonesia's post-independence economy. So, you might be wondering, does this historical setup even have a pulse today? Well, how about this number? 222,462. According to our sources, that is the record-breaking number of active Indonesian cooperatives as of 2025. And get this, that represents a massive 71% jump from the previous year alone. On paper, this looks like an absolute triumph for the cooperative model. I mean, it seems like a massively thriving ecosystem, doesn't it? But here is where things get a bit tough. Our sources pivot the narrative to point out a pretty harsh reality. Despite those massive, record-breaking numbers, traditional cooperatives are essentially drowning in a capitalist ocean. And we're just impartially reporting exactly what the analysis indicates here. These organizations are deeply, deeply struggling to survive against the relentless pressures of global liberal capitalism. The sheer quantity of cooperatives out there is unfortunately just not translating into true, sustainable market power. So why the huge disconnect? Well, these cooperatives are basically staring down a modern abyss filled with internal vulnerabilities and external threats. First off, there's a heavy reliance on manual management and accounting, which is just causing massive daily inefficiencies. Then they face a severe lack of external capital, which, as the source calls it, is the absolute lifeblood of modern business. You also have shockingly low participation and outright disinterest from younger generations, who just view these institutions as hopelessly outdated. Add in a heightened risk of internal fraud, plus fierce competition from incredibly well-funded fintech platforms, and you've got a perfect storm keeping traditional cooperatives from reaching their true potential. But what if there's actually a proven way out of this mess? Our sources point to a global mentor to show exactly what is possible, and that is the Mondragon Corporation over in Spain. The sheer contrast in how they operate is just staggering. Take traditional banking, for example. The wage ratio between the lowest and highest earners can hit an extreme 1 to 118. That's huge. Yet Mondragon's cooperative bank maintains a strict solidarity wage ratio, capped at a maximum of 1 to 5, meaning the CEO only makes 5 times what the absolute lowest paid worker makes. It's a wildly powerful indicator that rigorous financial success and strict wage solidarity can actually exist in the same room. Okay, let's break down exactly how Mondragon pulls this off because it boils down to a few core principles. First up is labor sovereignty. This means profits follow your actual work contribution, not just your capital investment. In fact, capital is treated strictly as an instrument. It's basically just a tool with absolutely no voting rights and heavily capped returns. And because these different branches aren't constantly fighting each other for investment dollars, they can rely on inner cooperation to build synergy and ensure collective survival across the board. Finally, they pour massive resources into education and highly professional training. Together, these principles successfully balance real social transformation with top-tier business professionalism. Now, if you're sitting there thinking, okay, sure, that sounds nice, but does this highly ethical model actually scale in the real world? Try 1.8 billion euros. That was the 2022 turnover of Eroski, which is Mondragon's retail arm. A number like that completely shatters the myth that cooperatives have to be these small, hyper-local, technologically lagging operations. It proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that cooperatives can be multi-billion euro global titans without sacrificing a single one of their core democratic values. How do they actually survive the rough patches to reach that massive level, though? They rely on what our sources call the multi-stakeholder model. For example, Eroski integrates 9,500 worker owners with 1.3 million consumer members. This complex, interwoven structure creates just incredible market resilience. In fact, our sources note something amazing. During severe financial crises, worker owners at Mondragon have actually voted to take temporary pay cuts themselves to save the organization and prevent layoffs entirely. I mean, think about that for a second. That is a level of solidarity and self-preservation that is virtually unheard of in traditional corporate structures. So how does Indonesia take this massive global success and adapt it to overcome its own current crisis? Well, our sources lay out a literal blueprint for a digital rebirth. To actually engage Gen Z and win in the modern era, cooperatives have to evolve into platform cooperatives, where the gig workers themselves actually own the algorithms and the distribution networks. They also have to implement continuous digital forensic accounting to completely eliminate that risk of fraud we talked about earlier. They need e-voting and blockchain for secure, transparent, democratic participation. And finally, they absolutely must take the lead in the green economy, aggressively focusing on renewable energy and sustainable agriculture.
But here's the catch. Technology alone isn't going to save the day without rock-solid human governance. Structural reform requires very specific steps for implementing what's called good cooperative governance. Step 1. The General Assembly acts as the ultimate authority. Step 2. The Governing Council serves as the legal guarantor overseeing management. Step 3. The Management Council handles the actual operational execution, and this is absolutely crucial. They are strictly forbidden from holding a seat on the Governing Council. Finally, an independent watchdog and audit committee ensures absolute compliance. The sources stress heavily that this strict separation of powers is completely non-negotiable if you want to prevent conflicts of interest.
And that brings us to the ultimate takeaway from today's sources. Making the shift toward an accountable digital ecosystem, it is not just a choice. It's actually a constitutional mandate. This perfectly summarizes the core message of our explainer today. Surviving the future requires a radical technical evolution. It requires seamlessly marrying rigorous global management standards, like the ones we just explored in the Mondragon model, with Muhammad Hatta's original noble vision of true economic sovereignty for the people. These two concepts aren't mutually exclusive. They are totally mutually dependent. I want to leave you with one final, deeply provocative question to chew on. Are you ready to be an owner and not just a worker? Because if cooperatives successfully achieve this digital rebirth, that is exactly the opportunity they're going to present to the modern workforce. You won't just be an employee at the mercy of some distant corporate board. You will be an actual owner with a real voice. It's a profound question to ask about your own economic agency in the world today. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive in the Explainer. I really hope this sparked your curiosity, and I will catch you next time.